Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for signing in to our webinar this afternoon. And we're going to ask Elder Phyllis Gugu to come and offer us a prayer. So,
That's for short. Dandel wisit wawisit niskam auchid niskam awajul niskam. Gisu kwalali uchudulana wikisini muye. Walali uchidandel ismawidaya. Ahedamula ipisquandane imek. Klamin gislide o dandel menwegen. Ignuminen en sidworen. Klamin chido desenda hoigelo kulasitramo. Ignuminen saltoltinen. Klamin gisya watesin salsudim sitamia. Ignominen get me der sortinen, klamen chido dasen, sit wen nog dies wat je het kielek. Ignominen, melvidiel sortinen, klamma wen nu jaje diel si lugar menot luaran uladet. Ignomin menar jo oltinen, klamen ma wen oldek is na ulalet wen wigmajo. Ignominen benor diel sortinen, klamen ma wen kisjajes bediel si ga wigmajo. Achalnis kam ignominen get lower idi. Klamigis de multas en almignikis. Dandel wisi bogus niska much niska mawajo niska.
thank you, Phyllis. So, just want to thank First Nations Help Desk for helping to support this today, as well as the Wagaba School here. And this is our first delivery of our resource guide. And so we have a number of people in the room here with us today, and we have an overflow room with the teachers from Wagama School as well. So today I want you to understand that we're going to introduce the resource, as well as we're going to do a quick overview of one of the units. It's the healing unit. And we're specifically going to explore grades 7 to 9 curriculum on the Indian Residential School. So we have in the room, we have members of our Elders Advisory Council that have been involved with this unit, including both Sister Dorothy Moore and Doreen Bernard, who will assist me today in delivering the unit, as well as we have Mary Ellen and Phyllis, who are also on our Elders Advisory Council. And if you have any questions, Sheila Piero is online here to accept them by email. So Sheila can definitely relay those questions to us. And we'll save the questions to the end of the session, which will be around 3:45. We'll entertain questions and really just go over what we've learned today. So how do we get here today is through initiative through the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq. We've been working with the province of Nova Scotia on our cross-cultural facilitation program. Gerald Glowe's been delivering that program for the most part. And we saw a need that we needed to get more curriculum or resources out to other individuals that want to share Mi'kmaq culture, history, language with their wider audience of school groups. So we worked with our Elders Advisory Council and a number of our I would call our professionals in our communities to put together this resource, which covers 3 areas: contemporary issues, healing, as well as Nudugalim. So it's certainly been a very great journey we've been on. It's been painful, and it's been as well rewarding in terms of the product that we've come up with. So I understand a lot of teachers now have them in their hands. So I just wanted to acknowledge as well the brand new initiative, the Treaty Education Initiative. So we have Jaime Batiste here today as well. So Jaime was behind the project since day one in terms of being involved as one of our experts in the community. And his new role in treaty education, he sees as a valuable resource in getting it out to the teachers. So welcome to Jaime. So today we're going to ask Leah Rosemeyer, one of the authors of the publication as well, to help us go through the unit overview. So I would just call upon her to come and spend 5 minutes in giving us that overview.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to very briefly do a little bit of a unit overview so that people can understand where we're coming from. And also, because this is our first orientation, we wanted to be sure people understood that every unit in the volume is structured in the same way. So for the healing unit, there's a series of core themes and issues, and then there's some teaching strategies, and then there's content that's been developed specifically for different age groups. So there's a P to 3 group, a 4 to 6 group, and a 7 to 9 group for every one of our subject areas. So in contemporary issues, you know, there's a P to 3 unit, a 4 to 6, a 7 to 9. Same with healing, P to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9. As Tim said, today we're going to work on the healing unit for grades 7 to 9, which is the Indian Residential School unit. And the other units in the healing, the whole healing unit, include the P to 3 is a Muin story. It's about helping kids think about expressing emotion, and it's built off a story that Melody Martin Gugu wrote about a young girl who loses her dog, whose name is Muin. And then the 4 to 6 is the Miss Burnsby story, and that's about a student who encounters some prejudgments and assumptions from both classmates and teachers in his classroom. And that's the Miss Burnsby story. So those are other units in the healing unit, and there'll never be an orientation on those specific units, but we're hoping that you can, if you're teaching at those younger age levels, or you want to cover that content at any age level, you can draw on what we've talked about today. Very briefly, for those of you who are looking at your resource, the core themes and issues and teaching strategies are found on page 40 and 41 of the resource. And for anybody who hasn't downloaded it or doesn't have a copy, it can be found at mcmawidebert.com. So I'm not going to read through all the core themes and issues or the teaching strategies, but regardless of what grade level you're working at or which content you're working with, we worked hard to be sure that these core themes and issues and teaching strategies were a part of each and every unit that we worked on. So I'll just leave people to, and again, by the end of today, we're going to look at the website. So if you don't have this content, we're going to come back at the end of the session and show you how you can download it. It's all up online and easy for you to access. So at this point, we're going to move into the 7 to 9. At this point, we're going to move back into the 7 to 9 unit and talk a little bit about that. I should just say that Sister Dorothy Moore is going to read the Dante story with us, which is the core activity. Thank you. Core activity for grades 7 to 9. But it also, there is some content in the first part of the unit that sort of helps students to get ready to read the Dante story and follow the activities that are there.
Lucky, are you in the school? If you are, can you come up? There's a phone call for you, Lucky.
So what's showing on your screen now is just a set of the opening activities, and there's also for this unit in the volume where we felt it was necessary, and you'll see this in the centralization and land loss unit, we did write a short introduction. So there's an introduction to the Indian Residential School. There's a background that you'll see for this unit. And then there's two different opening activities. One deals with what is healing and just trying to prepare students to think about what healing is. And again, there's resources in the volume to help teachers think about what that means. And then a knowing, wondering, and learning exercise. And this just helps students sort of situate themselves in terms of their own knowing before they go into the unit. What do they know about residential school? What do they want to know about residential school? And then at the end to reflect on what they've learned. So those are sort of pieces. Again, there are Blackline Masters that can be downloaded online or just copied right out of the book. That help go through those particular units. So those are the introductory activities that are supposed to prepare students to read the Dante story and to move through the core activity. So I think we're going to ask Sister Dorothy Moore to come up and read the Dante story with us. And Sister Dorothy is a member of the Mi'kmaq Debert Elders Advisory Council. She's also a survivor and an educator. So she's here. Thank you. Welcome.
Jilida. Jazzy Dante. Thump, thump, thump. At first the sound seemed to echo in his dream. Dante slowly pulled the covers up over his head. His body was heavy, tired, and aching to fall back asleep. Sleep. Didn't he just fall asleep? Dante pulled the covers back down and glanced at the clock. The numbers were garbled and blurry. He rubbed his eyes and stretched his arms up over his head. He let them fall to the side with a thud. Dante managed to open one eye and then another. He looked around the room. It had been over a year since he moved in with his grandfather, but still the room felt strange. It wasn't his. Dante's eyes caught the sight of an old poster taped to the wall. New Kids on the Block. He thought of his mum, her warm smile and soft laugh. He missed her. He missed her a lot. Thump, thump, thump. Manjasi! A male's muffled voice came through the door. It was Edwell, Dante's grandfather. Dante imagined his grandfather standing behind the door, slightly stooped, leaning on his carved wooden cane, dressed and ready for the day. His gray hair neatly combed and oiled. Manjasi, Dante! Dante didn't respond. He lay there, still and silent. He waited. And then the sound of grandfather's moccasins shuffled down the hallway. Dante rolled over, pulled the quilt up over his head, and closed his eyes. He figured he could squeeze in just a few minutes of sleep before it was time to get up for school. A couple of hours later, Dante walked into the kitchen, grabbed his book bag, and rummaged through it. His head was pounding, and he needed a fix. Grandfather sat at the table, a cup of tea and a newspaper out in front of him. Fresh wood shavings littered the paper. The radio played softly in the background. He put down his carving knife and the wooden figure he was whittling on. He reached up onto the shelf behind him and picked out a jar of liquid the color of steeped tea. An old piece of masking tape was draped across the front, and in careful cursive writing read the Mi'kmaq word, Dupsi. Edwell held the jar of liquid out to his grandson. Naguis? Dante looked up from his book bag, shook his head, and held up the small plastic bottle of Tylenol. He opened the cap, tossed a couple in his mouth, and washed it down with a swig from his bottle of Pepsi. The carbonated soft drink quenched his thirst and burned as it passed through his throat, down his esophagus, and into his empty stomach. Dante sighed with relief as he thought to himself, "There's nothing like a hearty breakfast of carbonated soft drink to start off your day." Dante arrived late for school, just in time for his third period class. He enjoyed third period because he didn't mind the teacher. She was nice, a little odd, but nice. Mrs. B was the type of teacher who didn't roll her eyes when you explained that you'd missed the test yesterday for a treaty day. In fact, Mrs. B wasn't a teacher to schedule a test on treaty day. Mrs. B was the type of teacher who wore chunky bracelets handmade by kids in developing country. She was the type of teacher who showed up at the reserve powwows and ate Indian tacos and smiled proudly while awkwardly attempting the gojua in her Birkenstocks. Today was no different. As Dante walked into Mrs. B's classroom, He noticed an assortment of muffins, freshly purchased from Costco, set out on a tray in the middle of the room. Plastic cups of apple juice were set out beside them. A small handmade sign was taped to the front of the table. It read, Jazzy, Ida. Welcome, Ida. A trio of 3 balloons, the color of red, yellow, and white, hung to the side. Amen, Dante then mouthed the words. No person younger than the age of 18 should read. He had forgotten all about Mrs. B's guest speaker today. Poor Mrs. B, she was so excited. It was all she talked about for the past few weeks in school. He felt like a jerk. It was bad enough he never remembered his homework, and now he had forgotten about this. For homework, the class was assigned questions to prepare for Ida on an Indian residential school survivor. The class had been researching and learning about the Indian residential school, and Mrs. B was kind enough to credit Dante with an overdue assignment. His assignment was due months ago, and without it, he probably wouldn't get enough credit to pass. But being Mrs. B, she gave Dante a chance. He had to prepare an introduction, or rather a welcoming speech for Ida. He was not only late for class, but he forgot his assignment. Dante walked over to his seat, slumped into his chair, hung his head, and tried desperately to avoid eye contact with Mrs. B. Surprisingly, Mrs. B didn't mention anything to Dante. This left Dante feeling a bit puzzled, but he sat up in his chair a little anyway. Everyone took their places, and Mrs. B introduced Ida. Dante didn't really know Ida, but he had seen her on the reserve quite a bit. She was always being asked to do the opening prayer at community feasts and things like that. Ida sat down and opened up a small leather sack. She took out a pouch of tobacco, some cedar, sage, and a braid of sweet grass. She placed each in a large abalone shell, then took out her lighter. As she lit the sacred medicines, the students all sat quietly and watched as she carefully whispered to herself, Gisuk, Geabonomoyo, Glaman Gisibulimades, Ula Nutroti Diok. Give me de mano, Danteli Migmango Tiji. Dante, along with a number of Mi'kmaq students, wished they could understand the sacred words coming from Elder's mouth. The syllables were familiar to Dante, but Dante's only understanding had come from watching his grandfather's actions, as he spoke the language so familiar, yet foreign to Dante. Ida smudged the classroom, and the sweet-smelling smoke filled the room. Mrs. B was the first to step forward to smudge herself. She closed her eyes and used her hands to draw the smoke into her and brushed it over her body. Some of the students were a bit reluctant and shy, but they stepped forward and did the same. Ida sat in her chair. She twisted the tissue around in her fingers and looked up to the ceiling when she spoke. She shared the story of the Indian residential school, how it opened in 1929, how children as young as 4 years old were sent to the Indian residential schools, sometimes seeing their parents only a few times out of the year, how children were forbidden to speak their language, how they were taught to be ashamed of their traditions, beliefs, and way of life, and how they were taught to be embarrassed and guilty for being Mi'kmaq. Ida shared stories of abuse, stories of tragedy and despair. When the bell rang for lunch, no one moved. It was quiet, and the mood was still. almost mournful, as if speaking would have disrespected the memories of the past. The voices of students going off to the cafeteria and to lunch echoed through the door. Mrs. B stood up and presented Ida with a gift that the class had made. Ida was happy, and the two women hugged each other. As the students lined up and took turns thanking Ida, Dante felt compelled to stay. He sat at his desk reflecting on the stories that Ida had shared. He thought about what Ida said about the negative consequences and how the effects were still being felt today. Wow. Everyone was gone, and Mrs. B helped Ida pack up her things. Ida looked over to Dante. The elder and young man caught each other's eyes. Ida's eyes were warm and inviting. He thought of his grandmother. Dante somehow felt disrespectful to Ida and looked away. Ida took a seat close to Dante. Then she took out some pictures and laid them on the table. Dante picked up the photos and looked through them. Ida asked Dante questions. Daluisin. Dante was embarrassed. He didn't understand what she was saying, but he guessed that she was asking for his name. Ida smiled when he replied with his name. Where are you from? Who are your parents? Oh, I know who your grandfather is. The elder and the young man bonded over conversation while Mrs. B tidied the muffined crumbs and spilled apple juice. Ida pulled out a picture and handed it to Dante. Dante looked at the picture and examined it closely. It was a group photo with a large number of children sitting or standing in rows. They sat around a large man, who Dante guessed to be the principal or priest. Ida pointed to a little boy in the third row. There in the third row was a little boy with a dull smile on his face. His dark eyes were piercing. They looked sad. Dante's heart skipped a beat, and a small gasp escaped his lips. He thought to himself, could it be? The room spun, and he shook his head. He wanted to focus. He wanted to know the truth. Dante brought the small photograph closer to his face, and he examined it again. The boy in the photo appeared to be about 6 or 7 years old, and although he was surrounded by other boys and girls, he looked scared and alone. Dante's mind swam with questions, and he was flooded with emotion. Where was the boy's mom? Did he cry for her when she was gone? Was he afraid? Did he get hurt? Did anyone hug him and let him know that it would be all right? Where was his dad? His grandmother? His grandfather? Who tucked him into bed at night? Who told him stories of the stars and how the universe came to be? Who made him feel loved and secure and special? Perhaps nobody. Dante dropped his hand with a heavy thud, and he released a deep sigh. Ida's weathered hand reached out for Dante's, and Dante looked up at Ida. Their eyes met, and no words needed to be exchanged to describe what Dante knew. She didn't need to explain. She didn't need to talk. Dante knew. And then more revelations came to Dante. He understood so much. He understood the pain he saw in his grandfather's eyes every day. He thought of his grandmother's quiet moments. He knew why his mom was gone. He thought of his grandfather quietly carving axe handles, making baskets. Of Dante ignoring grandfather's invitation to learn. Get come, quiz. Dante thought of his grandfather, reaching for the jars of Indian medicine, all of the stories he told, the language is shared. He had been trying to make up for all that he didn't teach his own daughter. So he tried to teach his grandson. After all of the years of Dante choosing to hold on to the anger and bitterness, suddenly he felt a release. He took a deep breath and let it out. He didn't fight the tears that rolled down his cheeks. Dante pushed the photographs aside and hugged Ida. Ida hugged him back and didn't let go. He thought of his grandmother and his heart filled with love and kindness and compassion. And then he thought of his grandfather, Edwell. He thought of the 5-year-old boy in the picture, and he wanted to hug him. He wanted to tell him that it was okay and that he loved him. He wanted to make peace.
Okay, thank you very much, Sister Dorothy. Kevin, we're just having a little technical issue here. We can't see what we're projecting on the screen there, so our little inset screen sort of disappeared. So when I go to my presets, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, if you would just, first of all, pick up your remote. Don't set it down because that'll cause it to disappear.
Okay.
And then there's a PIP, picture-in-picture button. That'll put you back up to the, down below,
Yeah.
to the,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. There we are. Okay. So. Yeah. Okay. So we're back again. So thank you very much, Sister Dorothy. We love that story, and Melody Martin Gugu created and put together such a powerful words for us to get a good visual picture of Dante and his experience with his grandfather. So part of the extension activities, we have Doreen Bernard is here as well. Doreen's a survivor of the Shubenacadie Indian Residential School as well. And she's worked with our project, the Mi'kmaq River Cultural Center project, in the past, collecting a number of stories. And we've asked her to come and share a little bit about the extension activity. So I'd call upon Doreen. Thank you.
Hi. Well, the extension, the first one on page 82 is on the discussion, how the story suggests focusing on the discussion of forgiveness, letting go of anger, resentment, bitterness, allowing kindness, empathy, and understanding to fill the void. So Dante's, the story of Dante promotes understanding. When he, as he's hearing a story from another survivor, it triggers the memories of his own life, with his family, and it helps him to piece together, begin to have understanding about why things are the way they are. So it's important to acknowledge that someone we trust or love can hurt us, and while this cannot be forgotten, we don't want it to control us either. The discussions can emphasize that in many ways forgiveness benefits the person who is hurt more than it does the person or the circumstances that create the original pain. So, the first part of it is to promote discussion within the classroom on how the story, when Dante looks at the picture and he's seeing the picture for the first time and he recognizes his grandfather, and he begins to think of him as a child, and I think that's really important that we have these images, these stories, and these things to help the youth, the young people, to begin to understand where their grandparents and their parents, where they come from. So it's important to say that forgiveness does not always mean acceptance of pain or trauma caused by the individual or the event, by an event, nor does it necessarily mean a renewed relationship with the person who caused the pain. Forgiveness sometimes best happens at a distance, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. And in many of our families, we're still dealing with a lot of the impacts of residential school. And the more knowledge our families and our children have on the impacts of residential school, they begin to understand. And I think it's really important that these discussions take place. The second part of the extension activities is the alternate ending. So to get the students to think more deeply about what forgiveness means and to write another ending of the story. What happened between Dante and Edwell, and how he learned about the residential school experiences. Maybe seeing that they shared. He went home and spoke to his grandfather about what he learned, and maybe that would open a door of communication and healing and forgiveness between them. Writing alternate endings, filling in the voids about what happened to Dante's mother, and about the impacts, the things that happened within their lives. The journal writing. So writing a journal, encouraging writing that as a means of expression and healing should never be underestimated. So I think a lot of the opportunity to write about how these teachings, I guess the teachings and out of these discussions and out of the work that they do, and how that helps them to on their own healing journey and their own understanding. And listen to the survivors. Talking with survivors can happen prior to working with the story, Dante's story, as it was described in this unit. Also, there's many survivors that would love to be invited to come into a classroom and speak to a class about their experience, and to help them with their learning, and I guess to promote that understanding. And I think it's really important that we have stories and profiles that we included into the website, the Megan Wade DeBert website, on that are well, we have the elder stories as well, and then we have, and I think having the students read those as well, and to get an idea of who our people are in our community, and who the elders are and the speakers are in their community. And also, they are open to one-on-one teaching and one-on-one communication with the students that come to them, to sit down with them, to speak to them. The other, on the next page, 84, the extension activities on Project of Heart. I know a lot of you may be familiar with the Project of Heart, and those were a lot of their exhibits were the small tiles that they used after having an elder, survivor come in. The students drew on these little tiles, and they put what it meant, or what they learned, or something that really spoke to them during that time, that meeting with the elder. And they did up an art project. So there was many different schools that were involved in that. It was pretty amazing, pretty healing for both the survivors that were involved in that activity, as well as the students that were involved. There's also songs, baskets, beading projects. making a quilt, and there's some awesome quilts that have been made. There've been some awesome quilts that have been made with panels for the discussions. I mean for the quilt, and that promoted a lot of discussion as well. Skits. There've been some and videos as well, writing stories and poems. The poems that have been written by Elder Rita Joe as well. There are more poems that she's written about her life and about the. But I Lost My Talk is one specific one, and it helps to bring about asking questions and starting to look at what were the losses, what did we lose as a result of the residential school, and the poem that and the songs, the lyrics to Bigwan Poulet, he wrote the song Forgiveness, and Forgiveness was won an East Coast Music Award, but it was the first song about the residential school. Excuse me. And Frozen Child was dedicated before Bigwan passed away. He wrote that song to talk about his experience as an adult, his experience of the losses in his life and the impacts of residential school. So these songs and these lyrics were really helpful to educate people about what the impacts of residential school are. So those are the extension activities. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you, Doreen.
Thank you.
All right, so we're moving right along in our agenda here, and I'd like to now invite Leah Rosemeyer to come up and give us a quick web overview. And following that, we'll have a bit of time to do some discussion and take any questions. So, Leah?
I'm going to disappear and turn the website on and just show people where things are located. But also, we just wanted to remind everybody that if you have questions or comments, anything you want to say, Sheila Pirro's here, and her email is very easy. Just send a note over to Sheila, SHEILA, at cmms.com, and she will pass things on. Okay? So we're just going to look at the website here. So the Maui Divert website, this is the landing page. So you just go right into the front. I'll skip the nice introduction for now, just in the interest of time. So this is our landing page. And to find the curriculum resources, you go up to sharing our stories, down to education and outreach, and then over to teaching about the Mi'kmaq. Click on it, and both, this is where you would download the full volume of the curriculum here, and it comes down as a PDF. If you would like any of the supplementary materials, there's another page, and all of the supplementary material is online, and it's set out by page number. These are small PDFs that you can just click on, or JPEGs. Some of them are graphics. So, and Gerald Glode, who's not with us today, he had another commitment, but he's done an unbelievable job of creating visual educational resources for the volume. This is just one of them that has to do with seasons and cycles. It's part of the introduction. But he drew, for example, the Dante picture and so on, and people can, sorry, I'm away from my computer. People can download those, use them. You're free to copy them as you wish. They're for teachers to use as you want. So you can see in healing, the prayer that Phyllis started with today is there. You can download that. And if you move through, the KWL sheet for the opening activity for this unit is there. as well as the Dante story, Rita Joe's poems, Bigun Pillet's lyrics to Frozen Child, and then some of the provincial, Nova Scotia provincial curriculum outcomes. So those are some of the pieces that are specifically related to the unit we talked about today. I just want to take one more minute before we start conversation and show you there are some other resources, particularly for the Indian Residential School for Shubi on the website. So if you go back up to sharing our stories, Doreen has been coordinating and leading the Mi'kmaq Bird's Indian Residential School Legacy Project, and she's been out talking with survivors all across Mi'kmaq over the last 4 years now. And she's also, so she continues that work. This has been partially funded by the TRC. And so on the website in this area is sort of our current plans for the Legacy Project. So you can read about that. There's some on the exhibits and programs that we have planned for the Future Center. I'm going to come back to survival profiles in a minute, but there's research and archives here. So if you're working, particularly some of the older students may be interested. There's Sister Dorothy with one of the keys. You can see here, she's got one of the keys from the residential school in her hand. Some older photographs from Elsie Charles Basque's collection. There's some archives. One of the other elders on the Mi'kmaq Elders Advisory Council is Doug Knockwood, who is also a survivor, but he has allowed us to share some of the correspondence having to do with his time at the residential school, which are poignant and meaningful, but would make a good classroom resources for teachers. There's a lot of photographs and other conversations. So there's a whole section of the website that deals with the Indian Residential School, and I just want to show you that. And then perhaps most importantly, Doreen alluded to this, but she has been working with survivors and will continue to do that. So this list will grow, but we have put up on the website a whole series of profiles of different survivors. And I think, at least for staff, when Doreen brought these to us, we were really pleased and felt like these were really important. And there's the voices of each person really comes through in these profiles. So these just, you just click on them. There's a PDF that will come up. You can download it or print it however you wish. And there are 8 up here right now, but this list will just continue to grow and grow every year. We would like to add more, and Doreen has plans for pushing that forward. So, and then the other thing is there aren't, the elder stories also under sharing our stories, these are short little clips, and I just wanted to point out that Doug Knockwood is here. He's not talking about the residential school here so much, he's talking about his Uncle Isaac singing in a church in Parsboro, but you get a sense of sort of some of the home life pieces from his clip. So that's the website. You can also start conversations with other people, but also if you have questions to staff, they can be logged on and put on here as well. And they're sort of at the bottom of most of the pages, not all of them. You can also always go to the contact. So, and then I also we'd love to put a call out if you run into trouble with any. And then also the resources will continue to grow. The most up-to-date files for the supplementary material will be on the web. So if we find a little typo or we find a little error in something, we of course can't reprint the volume. I mean, we may reprint it, but at this point, what's printed is printed. But the website will be the place where the most up-to-date supplementary materials for the volume are located. So, and those mirror exactly what's, for those of you who have the printed version, the disc, oops, sorry, run backwards here, the disc in the back of your book that's what's on the website. So everything that's on this disc is on the website under the supplementary materials. So I think that's it for the web, unless there's other.
Nope. Okay, thank you for that quick overview, Leah. So we're into our discussion and question period. I don't know if Sheila, did you get any? I haven't. She hasn't received any questions, but from the classroom, is there anybody there that has any questions? Just in the Wagobach school classroom?
No questions here, Tim.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, so it's a lot to take in for the amount of time that we've had today, but I respect the fact that you guys have been teaching all day already. I respect that for sure, and just wanted to thank everybody here and acknowledge.
And I guess it's to the elders who are here, as well as to the people. When looking at the overall story of the Mi'kmaq, why is healing important to teach? Why is healing, we've got 3 separate categories in this book. Why was healing an important one for our students to learn and to really take into account when it comes to the education system, the overall story of the Mi'kmaq? Where is healing in terms of the importance in that? Thoughts and your views on
Are into school? So I think it's really important. There's that, we call it transgenerational trauma, which goes down. After all, we are people that come down, like from grandfather, great-grandfather, great-grandmother, great-grandparents, great-mom. So I think some healing is really important, I think.
For the fact that so much has happened through the residential school system relating to our who we are as Mi'kmaq and how we have lost so much of that, and the consequences of what happened to many of our survivors, and the many hardships that resulted from the residential school, mentally and psychologically. And I think relating to that, in order for our students to fully understand what the residential schools did to our people and why we are pushing it so hard to relay the stories to them, and why it is that we who have attended the residential schools need to heal, and why is it that we need to heal? And in order for it doesn't come overnight, healing takes a whole community of people to happen, and we need everyone's help. And particularly the young people need to understand it, and why we are the way, us older ones are the way we are.
Yep.
I had a little something that I think it's really important because of historic trauma. Historical trauma was more than just the residential school that we're trying to heal from. I mean, colonialism, acts of genocide, introduction of diseases, introduction of religions, the government policies to exterminate and assimilate us, and to end the Indian Act, illegalization of our ceremonies and our culture, our language. Residential schools is one aspect. There's so much that we need to heal from, and I think it's part of our history of colonialism, and I think they need to see that. So we're not just the way we are because of the residential school. There's many things are contribute to that, and I think if they begin to see, the whole picture holistically, how all this affects us, then I think they can build from there and
It's
understand.
so complex.
It's complex. Yes.
Also, the loss of pride and dignity has a lot to do with from the very beginning.
So when I first started this project, not this one, but working at the Confederacy, I had the good fortune of working with Merdina. And Merdina, very early on, we worked on a photo project, and she wanted us to understand, in the Elders Advisory Council, one of their first meetings was understanding, before you can heal, you need to understand what has caused the hurt. And so for me, being with Merdina, we were in Washington, D.C., where our photo exhibit was being put up, and she took me aside, she said, I want to show you something. So she took me over to a wall, there's a photo on the wall, and she says, if I'm not mistaken, he said that photo right there, just said your father is right there, right? So that was a big moment for me. And then looking at the records later on, so my father was residential school. He only spent about maybe 2 years, but maybe 2 years too many, right? The damage. And Sister Dorothy was there at the same time. And she was there, I think, for a year and 11 months, almost 2 years. And so I was just looking at some of those records yesterday. I have access to some of my father's sort of information in there. And, you know, he was there, his brother and his stepbrother. And they were there for a small period of time because there's no school in Malagawach. And that's where my grandmother and her husband at the time, my grandfather, had passed away. But they thought that they were sending their children to a better place to get education. They didn't stay there very long. I asked my Uncle Roddy, he said, Uncle Roddy, he said, how'd you get out? He said, my parents came and got us. He said that wasn't what they were envisioning for them. So anyways, so it's been a healing journey for me since that day, just realizing that my father never said, oh, I went to residential school. Like, he buried that down so deep. He never shared that, right? So, you know, putting all the pieces together in the last 15 years, I'm thankful to everybody in the group here because I get to learn that every day. But I'm lucky in terms of the resources I have right here, right, to do that. So, you know, just to share that. So,
Excuse me, Tim.
Yeah,
I just
okay.
thought I would remind you that there's at least 8 people at the Nova Center, and you
Okay.
might have forgotten about them because we don't see them. But it might be a good time for you folks to open up your microphone and make a comment or a question if you'd like to.
okay. Is there any questions, Janice or Doreen?
You're asking questions, you guys can answer, and they won't have to change the camera back in here.
Everyone fine?
No, I think
It's a little heart-wrenching. It is. It's really heart-wrenching.
Okay.
I
All
wanted
right,
to
well-
get up when Dorothy was reading the story.
Yeah.
Dante. It's really sad. It's terrible that our parents had to go through such a dramatic thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not only our parents, but just going all throughout, all you ladies, everybody that's there today. I thank you guys so much for coming together and doing what you're doing. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you. Okay, so if there's not any,
No other questions, I got another one.
Hi, Tim. I have a question here.
okay.
One of the staff's asking, what was the reasoning behind using words in the story like needing a fix or like popping aspirin? Like, they think it's kind of like feeding into the stereotype, I guess.
I want to speak for Mello. You guys, this is Leah. I worked closely with Mello in a lot of the writing pieces, and she wrote. Sorry, Kevin, I'm not sure where I am. Mello wrote the story, so I don't want to speak for her, and maybe we can post on our website. But I think that the reality for a lot of survivors is that there has been a lot of substance abuse, and that's been part of healing and coming through the Indian residential school experience. So there was a lot of talk about what to do there, and she thought a lot about whether to leave those words in and whether that was feeding into a stereotype. But she also wanted people who have been through addiction, are in addiction, or have survived addiction to have a space to talk about that. And I think she felt like the story opened that space for conversation about it. But really, I wouldn't want to say more than that. I think she needs to speak to herself. But all of the content was... You know, one of the things Tim talked about was the process we went through to do this, and there were 30 or so educators and experts, Mi'kmaq educators and experts who worked on this, so everything was vetted through them and everything was talked about with them, and there was conversation about that. So, you know, I think people are picking up on that, but that's some of the reasoning behind it. I don't know if others want to speak to it, but there was discussion about it, and it was intentional.
I think when I was reading the story, I wondered the same thing, but then I think it fitted in because of his age and the lifestyle he was leading, and he ignored Edwell's Dupsy medicine, but he did come back to the Dupsy at the end of the at the end of the story, he remembered what the Tupsi medicine was. And I think in that story, it shows there was an enlightenment on the part of Dante that the native medicine was much more effective than Kaino. That's my take on it.
Traditional healing.
So Jaime has one more question before we sign off. We'll take one more question, Jaime.
A lot of the discussion today around healing revolves around a word called reconciliation. And I'm wondering how similar or how different did you see reconciliation compared to healing? Is it the same or are they different? I just wanted to get the thoughts of the elders who were advising this on what their thoughts, and Tim as well, from reviewing all of this.
I think they're quite different. Reconciliation is making amends to people. Healing is the individual's journey. It's the individual's, it's inside yourself as a person or as a nation even to heal. In that way it's different.
Anybody else?
Yogi Bear said, when you come to the fork of the road, take the fork.
I said, take the fork, eh?
They could do it.
Take them both, yeah. Okay, anybody else? Anybody? More comments here?
I think there's an awful lot of in your question that it takes more than taking a fork. I think there is a great deal leading into reconciliation, and reconciliation doesn't happen as an individual, whereas you can heal individually, but reconciliation requires more than one person.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so we're at our close. I just want to again thank each and every one of you. And Lillian, I didn't acknowledge you when you came in the room. I didn't see you sneak by me. And Mary Ellen, I'm sorry if I didn't acknowledge you, but just to acknowledge, these are part of our Elders Advisory Council, and we get to meet with them on a monthly basis through our Mi'kmaq Bird Project, and we're thankful for that. And I just want to thank Kevin on behalf of First Nations Help Desk and supporting us today. So I'm glad that everybody was able to sort of bear with us today. This is our first webinar. We have 2 more coming next week in Member 2. We're going to be able to broadcast from the Member 2 school, and we'll be in Pictou Landing on the 27th. So if you guys get time to tune in, please do so. From 3 to 4 p.m. All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome. So if I can ask Phyllis just to close us with a prayer. And
Andel with progressive niska, mochiniska, ma, wajuvaniska. Ochiniska, megarwalali, which is delit quay a desigiski. Edamula, nige walian midan, chitagig mana, atan Edamuk, Kisuk, Chixiruxino, Dante, Kisses called Megisco. Mawadon and Udahoya Kaluk. Atahoimugus, we get with you, Ladno. Dante with the progressive niska, mochiniska, ma, wajuvaniska.